Hello, everyone. This is the Ophthalmology Business Podcast, where we help you develop your ideal practice with the help of other doctors and experts. The topics we cover include management, marketing, leadership, recruitment, HR, mindsets, innovation, and more. I am Naren Arulraja, the founder and one of the co-hosts of this podcast. Every listener of this podcast is welcome to join the Ophthalmology Business Academy, www.obacademy.org. The membership is on us, and it's our gift to you. In today's episode, I have the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Tommy Korn. He's a distinguished cataract and cornea transplant eye surgeon at Sharp Rees Steele Medical Group. Dr. Korn is known not only for his expertise in ophthalmology, but also for his contribution to the digital health space as an innovator and creator. In today's discussion, we'll explore digital, telehealth, and AI tools in ophthalmology. And we'll talk about how to enhance patient care access and reduce clinician burnout. So sit back, relax, and let's hear from Dr. Tommy Korn. Dr. Korn, welcome. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Naren. Really honored and humbled to be here.
Thank you. I know you are a busy person and, of course, a well sought after expert when it comes to the topics we're going to be talking about today. So I want to take a minute to thank you for taking the time to, share your experiences and knowledge with our listeners all across the world. Before we jump in, why don't you tell us a little bit about who are you? How did you get into ophthalmology? And kind of help us understand where you are today as well.
I'm Tommy Korn. I'm a cornea cataract surgeon practicing in San Diego, California with my institution, Sharp Healthcare. I got interested in medicine because my mother was a nurse and my dad was a doctor, a pediatrician. I was going to become a pediatrician, but my dad suggested that I go observe one of his friends who's a pediatric ophthalmologist in Dallas, Texas, named Dr. David Steger. So I spent a summer there during medical school, rotated into this internship with Dr. Steger, and Dr. Steger introduced me to his mentor, who was his pediatric ophthalmologist named Dr. Marshall Parks. And for everyone in ophthalmology, they know who that is. That's the father of pediatric ophthalmology. And for a summer in medical school, I spent an internship with Dr. Marshall Parks in ophthalmology in Dallas, Texas. I didn't realize who he was at the time as a medical student or the magnitude. So I really had a really good, close relationship with Dr. Parks. And he taught me so many things about life, about bedside manner, interacting with patients. He actually took me to look at a medical diploma in Dr. Steger's office, one that was handwritten by multiple physicians who were part of the state of California, who were family medicine doctors, internists. And he said, Tommy, look at the signature here. You can't tell their handwriting, it's not legible. And look at this certificate. This is the American Board of Ophthalmology. And look at all these ophthalmologists signing this diploma. Look how elegant their handwriting is. So if you're going to be an ophthalmologist, Tommy, you need to have good handwriting and penmanship, because if people are going to trust you with their eyes, they're going to look at how you handwrite things. And so I remember talking about these kind of stories with Dr. Parks, and I'm glad I knew him as a medical student, because if I hadn't known him as a medical resident or ophthalmologist, I would have just been completely terrified, because this is the father of pediatric ophthalmology. But so for a summer, I got to spend time with him, and I just realized, gosh, this is a sweet person, seeing all these complex pediatric eye cases and how he was interacting with kids and the stressed out parents. And so that's what really motivated me to go into ophthalmology. In terms of the computer stuff, I got lucky because as a kid, my parents saw the coming of computers, and they spent a lot of money and bought me an Apple IIe computer as a 10-year-old boy. And it was just a magical experience that I fell in love with that computer, with all the games and all the things it can do. This is, of course, in the early 80s. And so that intersection of technology, of ophthalmology, really led me to go into ophthalmology. And when I started the practice of ophthalmology, I love the profession because not only did you get to interact with people of all ages and all walks of life, you get to use new surgical tools and technologies that can help them. And so for me, it was that intersection. That's how I got into it.
Well, that's amazing. Yeah, it's awesome, right? Sometimes, it's like Steve Jobs said, you can't connect the dots looking forward, but you definitely can connect the dots looking back. So I guess that your dad suggesting you do that, internship at his friend's practice, an ophthalmologist, and then through that, you working for Dr. Parks. I guess at that moment, you probably didn't understand the significance of those things in your life. Or even you having those, computers when you were a kid. I bet at that moment you didn't understand how this is going to impact your life. But now looking back, I'm sure you're like, oh man, I'm glad those things happened.
Yes, I feel very humbled and fortunate.
Thank you. Let's jump into the meat of our conversation today. We're going to be talking about digital, telehealth, AI tools in ophthalmology. And the purpose is to improve patient care, access, and reduce clinician burnout. So in that context, how do you see digital tools like telehealth and mobile EMRs improve efficiency and, of course, outcomes, hopefully, in an ophthalmology setting?
Gosh, Naren, we're at an exciting time right now in human history where we have all these amazing tools. We're also at a difficult time in human history where the healthcare industry has been stressed as we exit the pandemic. But I always feel that when there's crisis, there's always opportunity to innovate. So for me, the first thing that comes to mind is digital photography. So I remember when I was a cornea fellow at UCLA, and my mentor, Dr. Bart Mondino, told me he would actually take a picture of all of his cornea patients using a conventional film camera, and then he would convert that camera into Kodachrome slides, and he would pull out the slides of his patient's eyes and compare it from visit to visit. And the one thing that he taught me that was so important, he said, Tommy, you need to take a picture of every single patient you see. You can't remember every patient you see, how they looked like a year ago, 6 months ago. You just have to take a picture because that's the only way you can remember. You can write all kinds of notes in the chart to describe a patient's eye, but that's just a waste of time because a picture is 1,000 words. Well, I had just finished practicing my fellowship and I went to private practice in San Diego. In private practice, you don't have the resources at an academic center, such as a film lab, taking Kodachrome slides, and then storing all these pictures of patients' corneas and eyes. But around that time, around the turn of the century, you started seeing digital cameras take off. And so I started tinkering with digital cameras, digital SLR cameras, taking pictures of patients' eyes. But using those large Nikon cameras, Canon cameras with a macro lens, I would come in and take a patient's eye. Let's say I was following a brown spot on their eye to see if they were having either conjunctival melanoma, cancer, or if it was just a freckle, a nevus. I would come in with that large camera, take the picture. It would be intimidating. The flash would go off. I would have to take the smart digital card, find some way to store that in my own computer. And as EMRs are starting to take off, could I actually upload that photo into the EMR? Lots of friction. The EMRs weren't ready yet. But then the EMRs started to get better and start to accept photos. And then all of a sudden, the digital cameras started to be point and shoot. And so I started moving from digital cameras to point and shoot cameras. But again, you'd have to take a smart digital card out, upload it to the EMR, very slow process. And then when I get into the EMR, I'd have to hunt and try to find where those photos are. But for me, the magic happened when the iPhone launched around 2007. Then all of a sudden, you could now take pictures of patients' eyes with an iPhone mounted to a slit lamp camera. And then as the EMR apps started to catch up and develop, you could now take the photo that's already on the iPhone, send it to the EMR, and it would automatically upload. And you can, as you know, the cameras have gotten better over the years. So now I can actually take a picture of a patient's eye within 2 seconds, upload it to the EMR. And now I can tell when a patient asks me, Dr. Korn, how does my cataract look like compared to 1 year ago? Instead of scratching my head and making up some white lie, like, you know what, it's about the same, I can now definitively tell them, you know what, here's what it looked like a year ago. Here's what it looks like now. It's the same. You don't need any surgery. You're okay. Or I can say, you know what, it's gotten worse. If you're bothered by it, it's time to think about surgery. And I can show it to the patient and they get it within 3 seconds, as opposed to spending 10 minutes of chair time hunting down paper notes, scanned words. So to me, that's one way of why I take a picture of every patient using the digital smartphone. In terms of telehealth, that's also another thing that we've actually been using long before the COVID pandemic to connect with patients. The problem with telehealth is the cameras to take a picture of the eye wasn't good. But around when Apple came out with the iPhone 13 Pro, you started seeing patients starting to take pictures of their own eyes with these macro cameras pretty darn good. And so you could start seeing better pictures that patients send you. And then you started to realize, wait a second, I can scale myself. Instead of having patients come into a busy clinic, they can actually just text me and send me an information where I can actually give them the care they need instantly. So, Naren, we're at a really exciting time. This is really the tip of the iceberg of things to come.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's amazing because these were things we couldn't even imagine, right? Just a decade ago. So it's just a totally different way of thinking. I mean, that example that you shared about the picture and how that picture provides a solution almost, right? Like where you don't need to convince the patient kind of goes with the journey with you and sees all of the information that you are saying. And it's that much more credible, that much more impactful. Like they're like, yeah, let's do it. I get it. You know, they don't need to trust you. They don't need to take your word for it. It's data.
You know, the other thing too, Naren, is, you know, there's also a lot of concern about AI and all these things. Technology is replacing doctors' jobs. I'm not worried one bit, because at the end of the day, when the patient has some type of information, be it a Google search, be it a ChatGPT search, be it they have a photo of their eye or their condition, they're going to have to need the human curator to ask them that magical question, doctor, am I okay? Do I need to do anything? And that's where we come in. So it's really the intersection of technology and human empathy that I think, you know, that I really love. That I love that space, because that's where we really can excel. So for all the doctors out there that are worried about losing their jobs, trust me, you'll never run out of a job. You're actually going to be needed even more.
No, I'm glad you addressed it because I think this is in the back of a lot of people's minds. I watched the interview of this person who's considered the godfather of AI. He's a professor at University of Toronto, and he predicted famously or infamously that we won't need radiologists in 5 years. And I think he was late. He was early by 5 years. You know, it's now more like 10 years. But still, you need a human when it's life or death, right? You need that human. Like, I mean, computers can help, maybe save you time, make you, you know, more efficient. But at the end of the day, I can't imagine a world where somebody trusts their life to a computer. I don't think that day will come. As long as humans are the customers, you know, if it's machines the customers, then who knows? But I think humans will not trust a machine, you know, with their life. So I think technology can help. It can save time. It can do things that we can't do, like remember a million examples, as opposed to you and I can't remember a million examples because it's all stored somewhere in a database. But yeah, I think I'm glad you brought it up, Doctor. Thank you.
You know, the other thing too is that the small, easy, mundane, routine jobs and tasks can be really done by the AI or technology. And then we, as the doctors and the people who work in the practice, can move upscale to handle the more complicated things. You know, for your audience who are managing patients, handling the phone calls and the triages. You can imagine AI, mobile tools, online scheduling, smart chats. That allows those mundane tasks to be handled automatically, whereas the more complicated cases and complicated questions can be answered by the human. So you can see how these two things go hand in hand. And so I always tell everyone this: you always see always fear and skepticism and also excitement with any new technology. I've seen it happen with lens implants, laser eye surgery, small incision surgery, telehealth. Technology is basically like a tool. It's like a shovel. A shovel can help you grow a tree, but believe it or not, Naren, a shovel, you can hurt someone with a shovel too. It's the human being, how they use a tool, that can really make it good or bad.
Exactly. I agree. And I think maybe you can share more about this. Like, for example, this podcast is brought to everyone to their iPhones or smartphones, right? In the old days, they have to go to a conference to have someone interview you. I mean, it just changes the game. It gives you capabilities that perhaps we didn't have before. And today, you and I can talk. You don't need to just get on NBC to be interviewed. I mean, there are so many people with podcasts and all kinds of niches and all that stuff. Now, can you share some practical examples of how technology can be helpful? Like, for example, I know you did some interesting work with Apple. Can you kind of touch on that and how that impacted tons of people?
Well, so some of the work that I've done there is basically in the photography space using these cameras, because when I first posted on LinkedIn about using, wow, you can actually take a picture of a patient's eyeball, the outer part of the eyeball, the cornea, with your own smartphone now, instead of a $15,000 slit lamp or a macro camera. I got a lot of negative feedback and concern, like, wait a second here. Well, this is going to replace slit lamps. This is going to replace photographers. And that wasn't really the case. The point I was trying to make was, wait a second here. These technologies, these smartphone cameras are no longer in the hands of the doctors. It's in the hands of the patient, the consumer. Now they can send us remotely great photos. You can see what happens. This means now that people who don't have access to healthcare in distant parts of the world can now send information and get consultations from expert eye care, or possibly from machine learning AI algorithms with human curation, of course. You can see how this helps democratizes care for everyone. And so once people understood that, they said, oh, yes, you know what? I can see where that happens. Other ways that I've used, for instance, these telehealth and mobile tools is a couple of things too. It's communication. So I'll give you an example. After I do cataract surgery, 10 years ago, I would usually call the patients at home with a phone call to surprise them. Hey, it's Dr. Korn, just calling to see how you're doing. Want to make sure you're okay. The patients just loved it when I would call and surprise them. But guess what? Robocalls and a lot of things started coming, and people stopped answering phone calls. And I would just leave voice messages. And then all of a sudden, telehealth tools that come about. And I actually use an app called Doximity, which allows me to send a one-way text to a patient instantly. So in other words, the patient can't text me back or call me back, but they know it's Tommy Korn, Dr. Tommy Korn, and send a text. And I actually send a little message. Hey, it's Dr. Korn, just checking up on your eye surgery. You want to make sure you're okay. Here's the number to call us back if you have questions. Here's 3 video links that we made to tell you what to care for your eye after surgery, how to use your eye drops after the surgery, and what are your activity restrictions, all in a nice text. And guess what? I can send that text to all 13 or 15 patients I did on that surgery in less than 1 minute. And all of a sudden, once they read that text, I can actually see if the patient read that text, and they read them, by the way. We are all glued to our smartphones. They read it within less than 1 minute. It says read, read, read. I know that I have closed loop communication. I've scaled myself, yet I've delivered a personal touch where they've gotten the message that they don't know it's me. So that's one way that I use that, mobile apps, telehealth. Another thing that I use mobile technologies like iPhones and iPads at the work is the EMR. So as you know, Naren, doctors are highly burned out because of a lot of things. And one big thing is the EMR. And the EMR is really bad because it's slow, it's clunky. And if you go into any doctor's office and look at an EMR, some of the software looks like it's written on Windows 1995. They
Right.
just haven't kept up. And every doctor has to log into an EMR at their PC computer. We've actually timed it. You know how long it takes to just log in, badge in and out of a computer in between patients? It can take anywhere from 45 seconds to 2 minutes as you're waiting to log in. And if you're seeing anywhere from 20 to 50 patients a day, and you add up the math, 50 times 2, 100 minutes, you're wasting 100 minutes a day. And then you multiply that for a month, and then for a year, and then for a lifetime of career. Naren, I've spent in my 20-year career about maybe 9 months waiting for the computer to log in. However, if you use that same EMR on an iPhone or an iPad that has Touch ID, Face ID, I can get into that EMR within less than 5 seconds. So 5 seconds opposed to waiting for a slow PC that's connected by Ethernet, by the way, to 2 minutes. Do you see the time savings there? But
Right.
believe it or not, we're in healthcare and in ophthalmology, we're still old school. We're still using old PCs, slow PCs, not using these fast consumer devices that we have in our consumer life. In other words, our professional life is still living like it's 1995,
Right.
but our consumer life is like in the 21st century. So you're starting to see enterprise fast things happen because as a consumer, the most precious thing is time. And for all the listeners out there, thank you for listening to this podcast, because it's really a big chunk of your time. We really demand things instantly.
Absolutely. Those are wonderful examples. And I think these are real simple, practical ways where technology can make such a massive difference, not only to the patients, but also for the doctors, right? You talked about doctor burnout. I mean, I think again, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but what burns people out, not necessarily is seeing patients, taking care of patients. It's all the other stuff, like waiting for that computer to load, how unfriendly it is to use, how you have to do it because somebody told you to. There's no rhyme or reason. No, it doesn't make your life easier or better. So you get frustrated when you're doing things that's not making things. I mean, who's frustrated using their iPhone to book an Uber, right? Nobody complains about it. They love it because it's so fast, so convenient. We like things that make our life better, but we hate things or get frustrated by things that don't. So any comments on that?
Yeah, Naren. So I look in life all about friction. And for me, at this point in life, I'm thinking about my time on earth is limited. Everyone's time, in fact, really, if you think about what everyone's stressed out about, it's really time, finding time. So time, when there's waste, there's burnout. Why does waste happen? Because there's friction. So when doctors, when providers, when ophthalmologists, optometrists want to get things done, they want things that are done fast, conveniently, and of course, low cost. Well, guess what patients want? They want that same thing. They want something fast, convenient, and low cost. And boy, when you get that thing, that's when you see things go up the S curve. That's why telehealth took off, because during the pandemic, because people could not see their doctor, there was a friction point. So they needed the fast, convenient thing to do. In ophthalmology, telehealth is not taken off because you still have to actually see the eyeball. The camera technologies are not good. And of course, you sometimes have to touch the eyeball by measuring the eye pressure. But it's just a matter of time when that technology comes remotely. And you just have to be prepared for it. So I would say, when you look for all the optometrists out there and people who are in the practice business world, you have to look things that are convenient, cost-effective, low friction. And if you don't find those things, you have to keep looking at it. But to get to that point has to require you to really step out of your comfort zone and have an open mind. The problem is we get stuck in a particular habit and doing an old way so much that we get nervous stepping out of the comfort zone. So I would tell you, always challenge yourself. Just because I'm using for instance, an iPad to get into my EMR pretty fast, you should be having an open mind. There's got to be something even faster than that. It's really all about moving forward, reinventing yourself every single time. You just can't accept the status quo because we're all living organisms. We continue to grow.
Well said. Well said. You were featured. I just watched that commercial before this podcast, actually. You were featured on this famous Apple commercial. I think it was shown in one of Apple's keynote speeches. We're going to put a link to that, the YouTube link. It was watched, million plus times, and you were in it. Can you talk about that experience and how you see wearable technology playing a role in healthcare? Because that's kind of what you're talking about in that commercial.
So, when the Apple Watch came out, people were the skeptics criticizing the technology, saying, oh gosh, it's just, how are you going to get an iPhone onto a watch? You can't, the screen is so small. But people didn't really think about what it was hired to do. So I like to think of technology as what are the jobs to be done, as from what I've learned from Clay Christensen and some of his students like Horace Daydew. Why do you hire technology? People now hire the iPhone not for a telephone. They hire it as a pocket computer to do a lot of things. So when the watch came out, people didn't know what it was going to be. And we actually had partnered with Apple from the beginning to develop an app to help patients prepare and recover from cataract eye surgery called the Sharp Health Companion. It's based on Apple's CareKit platform. And if you actually go to Apple's health website, you'll actually see our app there. It actually helps guide seniors what to do before and after cataract surgery so they don't have their surgery canceled, so that it reminds them to take eye drops on their smartphone. Apple had reached to us early on and said, you know what, we have this thing called the Apple Watch. We're wondering if you can find a way to find a use for it. So in 2015, we actually got a bunch of Apple Watches from Apple, and we actually gave them to senior patients using our app. And the patients loved it. They said, Mosh, the watch taps me when I need to take my eye drops. The watch taps me when I need to wear the shield so I don't get water in my eye after surgery. The watch taps me when I should not eat breakfast before I go to surgery. So we started to realize, the watch is not basically a timekeeper. It's actually like kind of a health guardian, notifications. And so we reported this impact to Apple, and it was cool. They gave us the watches. We used them. It turned out, as some of these patients actually bought the watch themselves to use. And I've bought the watch myself, and I always like to upgrade to the new technology because for me, the watch is my favorite computer because it's the computer that's on my wrist all the time, right? If you think about it, which computer is with you all the time? Is it your smartphone? Is it your tablet? Is your PC? It's actually the watch. So the watch is basically has a heart monitoring device on you all the time, right? So about 4 years ago, one of my good mentor friends from Thailand visits me, and we go to a restaurant. Tommy, take me to the spiciest restaurant in San Diego. I want to try some famous local cuisine. So I took him to this restaurant, and he started to grasp his chest, and I thought he was having heartburn. I said, are you okay? He said, I just don't feel right. My heart's feeling racing. So I put my wrist, I check his pulse, and his heart rate is going pretty fast. And I just can't tell a discernible pulse. It's not beating regularly. And I'm looking around the restaurant and say, you know what, gosh, they don't have no heart monitoring device. And then as I'm looking, it dawns upon me, hey, my watch has an ECG function. I take my watch, put on his wrist, and holy cow, it's atrial fibrillation. So as a doctor, I said, okay, you know what, something's going on. We need to just go to the hospital. So I actually film the rhythm strip on the watch showing his ECG, and then we go to the hospital. And the reason why I filmed it is because I suspected if we get into the hospital and his heart went back into normal sinus rhythm, the doctors would not believe me that he was in atrial fibrillation. But when I showed them the video clip that he was in atrial fibrillation, that they were on the monitor, they said, oh gosh, he is in atrial fibrillation. So my friend got treated with blood thinners, and so forth before he went back to Thailand, because, when you have atrial fibrillation, you're at risk for stroke. But before he went back to Thailand, he asked me to stop by the Apple store so he could buy an Apple Watch for himself. I'd actually asked him for permission to share this story. And so I had tweeted this story. I actually written a letter to Apple, to Tim Cook, about it. And I tweeted the video. It's easier to use your Apple Watch to detect a heart problem than to find a heart monitoring device at a restaurant. Well, that tweet went viral, over 1 million views. Then about a few years later, Apple actually reached out to me and saying they wanted to do a commercial based on that same episode. And so when you ask these health wearable things, it's amazing that you have these technologies on your wrist. It turns out this story of mine is not uncommon. One of my patients who used our cataract surgery app many years ago to prepare for surgery, and who used one of the early watches, saw my story, actually bought the watch for herself. She herself collapsed at home, and it turned out she had atrial fibrillation. So she went to her doctor, she got treated. So you see how you can only look back and connect the dots, how these technologies happen. So yes, I've seen these technologies not help my patients, but help my friends. And the watch can really detect right now heart rate, atrial fibrillation, temperature, oxygen, fall, gait tracking, caloric consumption. It's just a matter of time when it might track blood pressure. It's just a matter of time when it might check blood glucose. Do you see how these things happen? So I'm really excited about wearables on the wrist. The other thing that I'm super excited about that I think might happen, I'm not certain yet, is, of course, if you look at all the space on your body where devices can fit in there, and what are some of the areas that can, if you're looking at me right now, for instance, where am I wearing technology? I have it on my wrist. I have it on my ears for hearing. Is there any other space left?
What about the eyes? What about the face?
Of course. Jackpot, the eyes. So you can imagine now, if there's technology around the eye, how does that augment the most important sense on our body, vision? Does it help me see the world? Is it monitoring my eyes? So I can't talk about what's going on in that space, but I believe there's going to be some great excitement coming up in the eye space with technology. And that would be a wearable itself, the eyeglass, if you think about it. But, I think we're starting to see the early beginnings of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I heard Apple is also getting into that space, and I know Facebook has some products in that space. And so I think that's going to be very exciting. Nobody knows where it's going to end up. It's still early days, but I'm sure a lot of interesting things will happen.
Well, I would tell you this, it's exciting because optometry is going to be at the heart of that discussion, if there's anything going to happen in augmented reality, virtual reality. But I think it's important these technologies happen with a couple key considerations. Number one, great taste, in the sense that great user experience, frictionless, that it doesn't seem odd, it doesn't intrude in other people's privacy. So the other thing is, of course, privacy. That's huge. If all of a sudden you have a camera, a device on your face that's looking out the world, is it recording all the time? Privacy is a huge fundamental right. And so I think all those things, tactfulness, user experience, being polite, being considerate of others, and privacy, this is what will make technology great. Of course, the opposite can be true. If you monetize it and you use it for nefarious reasons and you don't respect people, that's where technology can go wrong. Again, the human being is really the determination of if something is going to be good or bad.
Absolutely. And I think there can be horror stories. For example, I understand every or most airports in the US now, you are recorded the minute you enter the airport to the minute you exit. And they're even listening to you. They're listening to your conversations. And they're combining it with AI to determine who is risky, who is not. and there's a lot of bias also, right? If the data set doesn't have a lot of people who look like you, for example, then you might be picked out of the line more often than not, because the data is not, it's very biased because of the data that it has. So it's a crazy interesting space. And also there's this other company I'm not sure if you've heard of. They took 3 billion pictures from Instagram and all the social media apps, and then they started using it and giving it to police departments and all kinds of other people in conjunction with AI. And that was a huge controversy. So you're right. It is scary in some levels if you think about it, especially if privacy is not respected, because they know everything, like all the time. It's just, but hopefully, I hope people like Apple won't do that. They will err on the side of privacy and the consumer more so than the big companies and the big governments.
Well, I would tell you, if anyone is going to do it right, I really truly believe and hope it is Apple, because Apple at its core, they have privacy as their most fundamental right. That's why when you see Apple is very secretive on their products, it's not just their products, it's also on patient data and everything else. And our work with them over the years, they really care about the customer and the user, which is, of course, in our field, the patient. And certainly whenever, as I think ophthalmologists need to also realize, and optometrists, we're in a key role. Whenever I, for instance, share any photo of an eye, believe me, I've explained to the patient, here's how we're going to use it. I've even go to the effort to try to scrub the iris data if there's any picture of an iris, because I know that these things can actually identify even the exact human being who these photos come on, because privacy is really a fundamental right if you really think about it. And if we don't respect that, boy, the human race is in trouble. And so that's why I have faith in Apple, because you always hear about them going up against the government. They won't open up a phone no matter what the situation, because really at the end of the day, it really comes down to privacy. They themselves can't even open up certain things because that's their North Star. And a lot of the projects, a lot of doctors worry about, for instance, big tech coming in and disrupting pharmaceutical industries, doctors, and jobs. Of all the big tech companies out there, I'm pretty certain that Apple won't do that, because they really need they really believe in they believe in technology augmenting human beings. They don't believe in technology doing it alone. They also of course, don't believe that human beings can do it alone, but they really believe in that intersection of the humans and technology. And so that's why I think that they are a good curator of the path going forward.
100% agreed. As we come to a close, what advice, takeaways you have for everyone listening? It could be an ophthalmologist like yourself, could be an administrator, could be somebody who just focuses on the business side of ophthalmology. Like, doesn't matter who is listening. What's your takeaways? What do you want them to take away from our conversation today? I know they probably got a lot of points, but just the summary.
Fantastic question, Naren. And so I'm going to give you the answer that my dad told me many years ago, before I went to be a physician. He told me, son, when you come and go into business as an ophthalmologist, it is a business, but don't forget this. Always look at your customers, the patients, as a human being, not a number. Do what is right for the patient as if it's your mom or dad, not as if it's going to satisfy a number, a metric, or bottom line. That means you're going to have to do the things sometimes that goes against the bottom line. You should not operate on every single patient that you do. You should not offer every medical procedure, cosmetic procedure that you can think of. You need to know if it's appropriate to do it for a patient. And that is hard to do, especially in our data-driven, ROI infatuated society. You've got to put the lens of humility and say, what is best for the patient, the customer? That also means, of course, you play the long game, not the short-term game, and not become myopic. Because if you use the lens of humility, the lens of playing the long game, and really putting the patient, the customer first, you will realize, you know what, by doing that, I actually will take care of the ROI. I actually will take care of the business by doing what's ethically right for the patient. That means you're humble. You're not going to accept the status quo of things they're doing it. You're not, if you've been doing a particular business process, particular surgery, and it's gone well, you're going to come in with humility and say, you know what, how can we make this better? That means sometimes you're going to have to work weekends, late nights, because we're all burned out in healthcare. We're working, our time is constrained so much, but you just can't accept the status quo. You have to do something about it, and change comes from within. And when you can make that change and you put the North Star, put the patient first, not yourself, not the business practice, what is right for the patient, believe it or not, it always takes care of itself. And so that is the advice that my dad told me, and it certainly has helped me 22 years as an ophthalmologist, and it will certainly help me as a digital ophthalmologist and the path forward.
Thank you so much, Dr. Korn. I really appreciated our conversation today. I learned a lot, obviously, and I think the thing that I'm taking away from this is the future is, bright. It is challenging, like life is most days, but it's bright. It's bigger than what we can even imagine today. So thank you for your examples, your inspiration, your experience, and sharing it openly with our audience today. We appreciate it very much. Dr. Korn, if our listeners are like me, I bet they have more questions. They want to kind of learn more from you. So let's say they want to learn more about what you're up to, or even be in touch with you. How can they follow you around?
Naren, I post my work primarily on LinkedIn. And I use LinkedIn because it's probably the most civil platform, and it's very objective. So in other words, there's not a lot of false chat bots. So, and I know that the listeners are pretty authentic. So I do my work on LinkedIn, and I share most of my ideas there.
What's your LinkedIn profile?
If you search under Tommy Korn, TommyKorn, you'll see my name. It'll pop up, and it actually will have a verification that says government ID verified. So it does not require a $9.99 monthly blue check fee like other
Twitter
social media websites. It's actually verified by a government ID platform that you know that's me, because again, it's all about authenticity and privacy.
Right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And thank you for your time today.
Humbled and grateful to be here, Naren.
I also want to take a moment to thank our listeners. We appreciate each and every one of you. We cannot do what we do without you. If you like our podcast, please share it with your friends and on social media. Also, please don't forget to write a review on iTunes or Google Play. Your reviews will help other doctors and practice owners find us. Till we meet again, wishing all of you an amazing week ahead.